On the kitchen table lay all the photographs, the work of the private investigator I hired. I was just drinking soda while waiting for my wife to get home. The photographs themselves were compelling. There was no doubt that Bonnie, my wife of 22 years, was having an affair with a guy probably not much older than our 20-year-old daughter, Ginger. It didn't tell me how long this had been going on, but the private investigators said they knew each other well, so it definitely wasn't the first time. Bonnie was 5'8" and almost as slim as when we met. She had shoulder-length brown hair and the same brown eyes. I loved her with all my heart, which made the pain even more excruciating. I didn't think she was planning on running away with this. This guy, it didn't make the situation better, but somehow it made me feel a little better, even though in my mind, it was the end of our marriage anyway. She worked as a pharmacist at a local large pharmacy. She usually came home from work at 6:00, and I was usually home by 4:30. Right on time, at 6:00, her car finally pulled into the driveway. I watched her get out of the car, grab her bag from the back seat, and head towards the front door. We didn't lock the front door when we were home, only locking it when it got dark, so she was able to just walk in after seeing my car in the driveway and realizing I was home. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" I noticed how her gaze glanced briefly at the things laid out on the table, but if she realized what they were, she did not show it. She came up to me and tried to kiss me, but in the good old tradition of an offended spouse, I turned my head and she only grazed my cheek. "We need to talk," I said immediately. "Okay, honey, just let me leave my things." She placed her bag on the tabletop as she always did, and as she walked back to the table, I moved the photographs and documents so that she could see them better, and so that they would attract her attention so that she would understand that they would be the subject of conversation. As I had hoped, she simply walked over to the table and began looking through everything without asking me for an explanation, sometimes picking up a photo or document and studying it carefully. I prepared myself for tears and begging, but what I received was completely different. "I'm sorry you found out about this. I tried really hard to keep this from happening." Her words and tone of voice suggested that she was more disappointed that she couldn't keep her secret than anything else. I just stared at her, almost stunned by her reaction. "That's it? Is that all you have to say?" She looked at me, calm, as if nothing had happened. Where were the regrets, the agony, the fear for your marriage? If she felt it, she never showed it. Perhaps her motives were completely misinterpreted, and she was planning to leave me, and this all just accelerated her plans. "What do you want me to say, Henry? How about I'm sorry, and it won't happen again, and it was just sex? I'm not saying I would have believed you, but I would have expected you to at least try. Darling, except for the evidence in front of us, I never lied to you in our marriage, and I don't intend to start now. It really was only sex, that's the truth. But I'm not sorry that it happened, because that's what I needed, and I can't say it won't happen again, because it will. I can say I'm sorry it came to this." Wow. I went over this conversation in my head a dozen times, trying to prepare myself for how she might respond. But only now did I realize that all those times I assumed that she would beg for forgiveness. It never occurred to me that she would respond with a decisive, "So what?" "Well, Bonnie, I appreciate your honesty. It's not what I expected, but anyway, I'm going to see a lawyer tomorrow. I'm sure we can agree on a fair division and get this over with in just a few months." "Finish what, dear?" Bonnie was one of the smartest women I knew, but at that moment I couldn't imagine her saying anything more stupid. "Divorce, Bonnie. What else could it be?" "Divorce? Because of this?" "No, honey, I don't want to get divorced." "Okay, then promise me you'll stop seeing this guy and any others you might have, and we'll see if we can get through this. Call him now and leave him." I didn't really expect us to go through with it, but I wanted to see her reaction to my demand. Again, I expected her to jump at the opportunity, but she just sat there. She seemed to be considering her options. Finally, "I can't do this, Henry. I won't. I told you this is what I need. I'm sorry." So, when choosing between your boyfriend and divorce, You choose your boyfriend. Do I understand you correctly? It's not about Brian, honey. I don't care about him. But I need what he gives me. Bonnie, I have no intention of staying married to a woman who has sex with other men. So the choice is between them or me. Darling, she said, eventually ignoring my ultimatum, what you are proposing is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Let me explain it to you so you can understand how I feel. Do you have something to say that will make me agree with you having sex with other men? This is what I need to hear. I grabbed another can of soda from the refrigerator and sat back down at the kitchen table. I watched as she tried to organize her thoughts to try and justify her actions. I was really curious to see what she had to say. Henry, please understand, I'm not trying to be mean when I say this, but for the past few years. Well, I've remained unhappy when we make love. I was outraged. Why am I hearing about this for the first time? What the hell? So you don't get what you need anymore when we have sex? Or were you pretending the whole time that we were married? No, honey, you've never let me down. It's just that lately you can only do it a couple of times a week. We used to do this almost every night for several hours, but now. So I got old and you replaced me with a new model. No, honey, I want and need what you give me, but my libido hasn't dropped like yours. I still need as much as before. When we were younger, you were all I needed. But well, that's not the case anymore. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Maybe we could work out something. Because this is the conversation I was trying to avoid. Henry, I didn't want to tell you that you were leaving me unhappy. I know what a blow it can take to a man's ego. Hell, it would have been a blow to my ego too if you hadn't been satisfied. And you thought that cheating on me with another man would save my ego. If you never found out, yes, that would suit me. I would be satisfied, and you would believe that it was you who satisfied me. I love you, Henry, and I didn't want you to feel the way you did feel it now. So you want me to believe that this was done for my benefit. Obviously, I got something out of it, but the secrecy, yes, it was for your benefit. Darling, I was always home when I was supposed to be, and you never heard a refusal in bed, did you? I had to admit that it was true. Bonnie always did more than enough. But that was not the point. She continued. I always tried to make sure you got what you wanted or needed when you wanted or needed. Any extra things I did were in my free time and with people you didn't know about and wouldn't know about. I tried to keep those things separately. Not hard enough, obviously. I lasted more than 3 years. She had something of a smug smile on her face when she said that. At least that's what I thought. And she was right. I didn't suspect anything. If it weren't for the friend who saw her leaving for lunch holding hands with this guy, I still wouldn't know anything. Of course I was furious. 3 years. You cheated on me with this guy for 3 years? No, only about 4 months. Damn, Henry, it's probably time for a full confession. It would be nice. The first guy was a little over 3 years ago. It's been a year since I was completely satisfied with you, and I started getting irritable and snappy with people for no reason. I overheard some student in a store saying that I need to have sex so I can calm down, and I realize he's right. You and I made love the night before, but it only relieved the tension for a little while. So I approached him and asked him if he thought he could handle the task. He said yes, and we went to his house on my lunch break and had sex. He was big and strong, like you were when we were younger, and I found myself feeling better and more relaxed. I felt my head spin. Probably no one likes to hear that they are not satisfying their partner. I got up from my chair and went out onto the porch to get some fresh air. I felt her behind me. Are you okay, honey? Should I stop? Just give me a minute. My nerves calmed a little and my stomach settled. I grabbed a handful of saltine crackers and began nibbling on them while Bonnie continued her story. I felt terrible after I thought about cheating on you. It was just sex, I knew it, but I didn't think you'd understand. I came home that night thinking I'd give something away, but nothing happened. I decided it was a one-time thing and it was over. Obviously, it doesn't stay that way. No, not anymore. It didn't take long before I felt the need building up inside me again, and the same guy showed up again. I think he was mostly joking, but he came up to me and asked if I was ready for something new. Round. His expression said he didn't expect me to agree. I told him to be in his house alone at Wanazu and be ready. And again, you didn't know. And I guess it's my fault that my trust in you and my ignorance of what you do has somehow made me more pathetic in your eyes. Not at all, honey. It just made me realize that I could get my needs met without hurting you or taking anything away from you. So I continued seeing Darren once or twice a week until he moved to another state. Brian is the fifth one I've been with. As far as I know, you've never met one of them, and I don't let them talk bad about you. Like I said, it's just sex to satisfy a need that I have. I have. That's all. But I love only you, Henry. I don't like it, Bonnie. So if you love me as much as you claim, then giving it up shouldn't be a problem for me. Her head lowered, which was the short answer to my proposal. But she tried to object. Henry, I understand what you're saying, I really do, but I need you to understand how much I need this. I don't mean that it's nice and I like it, and that I would like to continue. I mean I really need it. I'm sorry I didn't come to you, but my intentions were good. Please don't throw away 24 years of our life together because of this. Please. She made a compelling case, at least if you try to look at it from her point of view. She's definitely right that a man doesn't want to hear that he can't satisfy his wife, even if he tries his best, although I knew I wasn't really given the chance to try. If I tried to hold on and couldn't, then maybe we could discuss alternatives instead of her making a unilateral decision. But if this really went on for 3 years, and why would she lie about it if all I knew was about one guy, then she clearly made an effort to hide it from me. I guess this is to be expected when someone cheats, but often these things hit close to home. However, she did not do this to any of our friends, or to any of our neighbors, or even to any of our colleagues. It started with some random guy making a mocking comment and grew from there. And she kept it within her work hours and in her area. It was just a small consolation, but it gave me some comfort and helped me believe that she really loved me and her motives were sincere. It didn't make me happy about it or mean I would accept it, but it did help me understand her feelings and be at least willing to consider an option other than divorce. Okay, Bonnie, I trust that you're being honest with me, and I appreciate it, even if it's late. The best I can suggest for now is to think about what you said for a few days. I saw her face brighten, and I didn't want to give her false hope. I still think divorce is the only option, but you've given me something to consider before taking that step. Like you said, we've been together for 24 years. It's at least worth some consideration. I knew that by not immediately starting the divorce process, I was putting myself at risk. I gave Bonnie at least hope of compromise and definitely opened myself up to criticism if word got out. Most people I know have a very negative view of cheating, no matter the reason, and until today I considered myself one of them too. But it's easy to say, kick her out the door, when it's not your marriage. I loved Bonnie from day one and will probably always love her no matter how things turn out, and that will make any decision difficult. The next day was Friday, and I took a few steps that I thought were smart, most of them related to finances. None of this could be undone if we somehow stayed together, but it would protect me well, ultimately both of us, in what I considered the likely eventuality that we would break up. I also made an appointment with a lawyer to prepare documents. Again, I could always just hold them or destroy them, but I thought it wise to have them on hand, just in case. We spent the evening at home, having dinner and watching a movie, without mentioning the elephant in the room. We cuddled on the sofa, and I got the impression that she hoped that we would move on to lovemaking, as often happens. I think this, in her opinion, would signal that I was moving towards her point of view. And while I was definitely excited, I felt it would be counterproductive to making a rational decision. I couldn't allow myself to be controlled by my emotions. In fact, this delicate truce continued throughout the weekend. We were affectionate with each other and carried on our normal conversations, except that we avoided the little flirtatious hints that we used to use on a regular basis. Bonnie made it clear that she was available to me, but I continued to resist, afraid of the message it might send to her and how it might make me feel. Naturally, my feelings controlled my thought process. How would I feel going to work every day knowing what was happening, or at least what could happen? It's not that I was at work supporting her while these things were happening. Her salary as a pharmacist and mine as a project manager at Alpha Logistics provided us with a very good standard of living, and she was more than capable of supporting herself. No, it was more fundamental. She was my wife, and someone else had her, and did it better than I, apparently. Could I tolerate this on some level, even as much as I loved her, and was sure that she loved me and would always come back to me? This was the question I had to answer, and it never left my thoughts. By Monday, I seemed to have come to a decision on what to do next. I sent Bonnie a message letting her know that I had made my decision and that we would discuss it tonight. I told her not to make dinner because I would be stopping at our favorite Italian restaurant for takeout. I waited until after dinner so we could focus on the conversation, which completely suppressed it during the meal. We were both nervous and tense in anticipation of what was about to happen. She was no doubt afraid that I would simply file for divorce, and I was nervous about how I would present the compromise I had come to. Oh yes, I've come to a compromise. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it was the best I could come up with. Will this save the marriage in the long run? To be honest, I doubted it, but it was the only way forward that I felt would both allow for this possibility and give me a chance to maintain my self-respect. Like she said, divorce is a permanent decision, and I was willing to at least see what could be done. She poured herself a glass of wine, and I limited myself to water. I'm not much of a drinker anyway, but this definitely wasn't the time. We moved into the living room and sat on the love chair, Bonnie to my right. I hope for good news, Henry. I know you're hopeful. I've thought very carefully about what you said, and I'm hurt and sad that you didn't share your concerns with me. We've been married for 22 years and together for 24, and I would hope that we can talk about everything, even something as potentially hurtful as this. But at the same time, I understand your thoughts and how difficult it would be to bring up this topic. I'm sorry I didn't come to you. In retrospect, I realized that I took the easy way out by trying to solve the problem on my own. I should have trusted that we could come to a solution together. I realized that all this time I was trying to figure out what to do, but I didn't find anything. I would gladly stop if I found some alternative. I'm sure that's true, but we can only go by the facts, not by what should have been or what we'd like. Here's what I'm proposing. As long as you continue to take the same precautions as before, I won't object to the continuation of your actions. She looked at me with anticipation, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it didn't happen. Yet, I continued. I've loved you, Bonnie, from the very beginning. I want you to be happy, so I'm willing to take this step in recognition of that fact. And you're not going to divorce me. I can't make long-term promises, but I don't think it will be necessary, at least for now. Bonnie jumped to her feet with a big smile on her face. She got in her head what she wanted, a loving husband at home and a lover on the side to satisfy her additional needs. She hugged me and kissed me before I could continue. I love you so much, darling. Let me take you to bed and show you how much I appreciate what you do for me. I put my hands on her shoulders and gently pulled her away from me. We're not done yet, Bonnie. Please sit down. She frowned a little, now wondering what would happen next, although I suspect she didn't expect my words to go in the direction they did. As with any compromise, neither party gets everything they want. Obviously, I'm compromising on your two main points, but I have my own demands. You can reject them, but that would mean that I'll just proceed with the divorce. Is that clear? She nodded. Once you're done wanting other men, you'll let me know, and then you and I will resume our sexual relationship. What do you mean by resume? It implies that we will stop at some point. We will stop, and that moment comes now. From now on, Any intimacy between us will be limited to kisses and hugs. Nothing more. But I don't want that, Henry. I thought I was clear that what we're doing is important to me and I need it. You said it, and you also made it clear that your lover is more important to you now than our marriage. You were willing to let me file for divorce instead of giving up your little side project. I was just trying to express how important this is to my well-being, but I need both of you. And you will get them, but with restrictions. Again, you can refuse, and we can file for divorce. It's up to you. The changes in her facial expression reflected the thought process she was obviously going through, and I could see her finally coming to terms with the fact that she had no choice. I probably agree, but under protest. And not just for my sake, dear. I know you don't need it as much as you used to, but you still have needs, and I don't like that you have to go without this. The next words I spoke clearly cut her like a knife through her heart. Who says I have to do without this? What? What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. I'm not going to hold back while you sort out your issues. Henry, I definitely don't agree with this. The whole point of what I do is that I need more, but you yourself said that I satisfy you completely. I don't understand why you would stop making love to me, your wife, to look for it somewhere else. If these conditions are unacceptable to you, then we can continue with the documents. Can you at least explain it to me? I don't understand. I have two reasons. First, I don't want to put myself at risk of contracting whatever disease you're exposing yourself to. They're perfectly healthy, Henry. I insisted on a clean medical report before, you know. And how often should they provide it? Or do you expect these young, healthy guys to limit themselves to your hugs a couple of times a week? She didn't have an answer for this, which suggested that I was right in thinking that she only got it once before the first time. I continued. Exactly. Therefore, I would advise you to go to the clinic as soon as possible. I already have an appointment for tomorrow. My second reason is that you have already made it clear that I cannot compare with them, and I do not want to constantly expose yourself to such comparisons. I've never done this, and I never would. Perhaps unconsciously, but you said to yourself that after the first time with Darren, you were clearly aware of how effective he was, and conversely, how ineffective I had been the night before. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you did this consciously. Comparison, but you definitely noticed that. But it's more about me anyway. I don't want to think about what I already know. I just don't need a constant reminder that I've gotten worse, even if it's just in my own mind. I'm not going to expose myself to that. It looks like I have no choice. I don't want to lose you, darling, but I can't do what you ask, so I guess it'll have to do for now. Is there anything else? Yes, a few rules. First, the weekend is completely our time. Even if one of us has to work, that's no excuse for dating someone while we're out and about. I need to make sure that, whatever we do, your body will be clean, and I will offer you the same courtesy. This is completely reasonable and acceptable. Also on weekdays, we immediately shower and brush our teeth as soon as we get home, regardless of whether anything happened that day or not, so as not to give ourselves away. It seems quite onerous, but I have no choice but to agree. And we should be home by 9 p.m., no matter what, unless we absolutely must stay late at work. And I mean late at work, not I want to keep having sex, so I'll say that I'm late at work. If you lie, I'll submit the documents. I really don't like this, Henry. All these rules for our love life when it would be so much easier to just keep doing what we were doing. Can't you just forget what you learned? Could you? No, probably not. But I'll have to go through all this, and then I won't even be able to make love to my husband. It doesn't feel right. Nothing about this is right, Bonnie. Not a damn thing. But you made your choice, and I came in second place. So now I make my choice. If it's too much for you, just say the word, and you know what's going to happen, and then you won't have to worry about me anymore. Okay, honey, okay, I agree. Just please think, throw me a mercy bone every now and then. Just because you're not that good anymore doesn't mean I don't want you. And so it began. I admit that I have had my fair share of women that I would like to seduce, but doing so was an entirely different challenge. I'm not ideal. I think I look okay, but I'm not the kind of man that women throw themselves at. And the fact that I am married and everyone I know knows this would also be a big obstacle. So I did what most people would do these days. I turned to the internet. I was amazed at the number of sites dedicated to casual sex. I registered on one of the promising sites and created a profile. I even included a photo of myself, but made the face unrecognizable, not wanting to risk anyone I know seeing it. I thought the most important thing was that they could see me from the neck down. I actually doubted the success of this. Let's face it, if a woman really wants to have sex, she can do it at any time. Even if she's not particularly attractive, she can still do it if she's not too picky. So I assumed that any woman who showed interest in me would have hundreds of other options, if not more. The chances of her choosing me seemed astronomical. What I didn't expect was the number of requests I would receive. These were women who chose my profile and were so interested that they even sent me a message. The tone and content of the messages left no doubt about their willingness to simply meet and have sex. There was no romance here. There was nothing about dating or anything like that. The wording may have changed, but the basic message was, let's set a time and place, and don't forget to bring condoms. I was truly surprised. Of course, it's been over 2 decades since I was last free, and technology has obviously changed the dynamic completely. Women are also more assertive in achieving what they want than they were 25 years ago. It was a real education. So I decided that since this was happening, I would take the opportunity to broaden my horizons a little. That didn't mean I was going to say yes to every offer, but I was going to try some variety. I replied to the first sender of the messages. Like me, she included a full-body photo with her face blurred out. I was suspicious of the very attractive image, despite the profile's assurances that it was her and that the photo was current. Despite the impression I might have given here, I've never been a person comfortable with the idea of just having sex with someone. I really wanted to get to know these women first, although time certainly played a role. My idea was to meet for drinks or something to just chat for a bit before finding a seat. I took a week to set everything up online and get used to the idea of what I was doing. I eliminated some requests that, for one reason or another, did not interest me. The first profile that showed up in my inbox was from a woman named Kim. According to her photo, she had long, curly blonde hair, a slender body, and really big breasts. We communicated through the message section of the site and finally agreed to meet at 5:30 p.m. the following Wednesday at a sports bar near where she lived. I arrived home, took a quick shower, and arrived at 5:20 p.m., taking the booth in the back as we had agreed upon. She appeared about 5 minutes later. I stood up to greet her as she approached the table, and she smiled, noting how polite it was of me. We ordered drinks and talked a little about ourselves, without mentioning our love lives. She worked for a local marketing company that did promotions in roadside stores. This allowed her to pay the bills, but she was gaining experience and hoped to move on to another job within a year. I talked about my work, and she seemed very interested or was good at faking it. I asked the question that was bothering me. So why does a beautiful young woman like you meet an old man like me for sex? I wanted to try something new. Guys my age are not very good at sex. Oh, they can do it for a long time, but few of them really care about their partner. My mother always said that mature men are much better and more caring women than young guys, so I wanted to find out for myself. You and your mother have a good relationship, as I understand it. Yes, we have a great relationship. We can talk about everything. I would ask why a man your age would be interested in a girl my age, but I think I already know the answer to that. So the question is, how much longer are we going to sit here, talking before we go somewhere more private? I was looking forward to this. Obviously, we couldn't go back to my house, so Kim suggested we go to hers. She shared an apartment with a roommate, but she said she probably wouldn't come home until late in the evening and wouldn't bother us, even if she came early. Her apartment had a bathtub with a shower, which allowed us to be in there together, but it wasn't very convenient for anything else. When Kim took off her clothes, I was impressed. The photo on the internet was indeed hers. We spent several more than pleasant hours in her bed. That was great, Henry. Now I understand what my mom was talking about. It's a shame my boyfriend wasn't as skilled as you. Wait, do you have a boyfriend? Yes. We've been together for 2 years. So why? Listen, Henry, I love Zach. I really do. And one day I will marry him. And when that happens, I will belong only to him. But I'm young and I want to experience a lot before that happens. He knows that, and he's dating other girls too. We both know it's just sex. We love each other and will always be together, and we bring what we've learned into our own love games. I was thinking about what she had just said, and I think she could see it in my face. She continued, "We both have our reasons for being here together, and I liked it. I didn't ask about the ring on your finger because it's none of my business why you're entertaining me and not your wife. You have your reasons, and it's your life. Live it without my judgment. I had a great time with you, and I think you liked it with me, and if you want to meet me again, just tell me. But next time let's skip the drinks and get straight to the point, okay?" At that moment, Kim struck me as a very modern woman, although I'm not sure I thought that. But she was right in that we were just two people wanting to have a good time, and I really enjoyed being with her. Part of me lost sight that this was casual sex and not a precursor or part of a loving relationship, so the reality of her having a boyfriend hit me harder than I expected. You're absolutely right, Kim. I'm probably still old-fashioned in a lot of ways, but if it works for you and your boyfriend knows it, then it's not my place to judge. And I really enjoyed being with you. Me too. Will I hear from you again? I can't promise anything, but I think it's very likely. I got out of bed and started getting dressed while Kim lay on the bed watching me. An unpleasant thought crossed my mind as I wondered if Kim was completely satisfied, given that Bonnie was no longer satisfied, but I tried to push it out of my mind. She is young and obviously has other means to satisfy the rest of her needs, so I just accepted that I was completely satisfied and she had a good time. She walked me to the apartment door and kissed me goodbye. She seemed almost sad that I was leaving, but I didn't know her well enough to interpret her body language correctly, so I tried not to draw conclusions. On the way back home, I reflected on my evening. Sexually, it was great, but I was aware that it lacked the intimate connection that I prefer, like with Bonnie. But this was my first time, and I thought it would get easier with time. I walked through the front door at 8:50 p.m. and immediately headed to the shower and brushed my teeth, like I've done every night since this started. I noticed Bonnie was sitting in the living room reading when I walked in, and I caught a look on her face like she knew what I was doing, but if she suspected anything, she didn't say a word. To justify what we were doing, I felt the need to make an effort on the weekends to stay connected with Bonnie by doing things together. Some of them were obviously the mundane things of life, but we also had to do couple things. We spent Saturday doing chores and went to brunch on Sunday and then visited an art museum, which was her special hobby. She studied art history in college to fulfill a history requirement and developed an interest in it. It was a truly enjoyable day, and by the end, we were hugging each other like a newlywed couple. Despite what she had done and what we were both now doing, I still loved her and tried to express that feeling. However, I knew that at the end of the day, the question of sex would come up in front of me, and I was not sure how to proceed. Intellectually, I thought I should avoid sex with her, so she would understand what her outside interests were costing her. But I loved her and wanted her, so saying no would be difficult. Okay, I turned out to be weak, at least in my own mind. The night ended with Bonnie and I making love up a storm. Her passion for me was undeniable. But when we finished, all I could think about was that she still needed more, and she would probably meet her lover tomorrow. And it just depressed me that that's why I chose the path that I chose. I told myself that I would remember this feeling the next time I found myself in such a situation and not be so stupid. My Sunday with Bonnie was wonderful for my needs, but by Thursday I was ready again, and I had no intention of having sex with her again, so I went back to my online account. I had a message from Kim suggesting we repeat our meeting. I responded, making it clear that I was ready, but wanted to check other options first. I half expected her to be offended, but she just told me to have fun and not forget about her. It was a world I was not used to. My date for the evening was one of the black ladies who responded at the beginning. Her name was Vanessa, and she was 34 years old. She had long wavy hair, and I eventually found out it was some kind of extension. She kept her natural hair long enough to integrate it into other hairstyles. She was single or so she said, and had been hurt by her ex-husband, so she wasn't interested in relationships right now and didn't always want to take the time to pick up someone, although she did occasionally have casual relationships when she was in a club. She used the site to satisfy her needs between these occasions. After our brief acquaintance at the bar, we went to her house. She owned her own house and rented out 2 rooms for extra income to shower and get down to business. We showered separately. I went second, and when I finished, she was already lying on the bed. We broke up, and unlike Kim, she didn't say anything about getting together again, which I suspected would be the only time for us. I arrived home at 8:45 p.m. and Bonnie had not yet returned. I got into the shower as per our agreement. As soon as I left, Bonnie came into the bedroom and immediately went to the shower. It was 21:01. I assumed that we were both spending the evening with someone, and I was surprisingly unemotional about the possibility, which bothered me. This weekend was very similar to the previous one, except that I avoided sex with Bonnie. She seemed upset by this, but didn't say anything. It wasn't for lack of interest on my part, but I remembered how I felt last week and didn't want to repeat it. The next couple of weeks were a repeat of each other, except for the women themselves. Without the weekend relief that Bonnie could give me, I felt a strong need when Monday arrived. The first meeting the following week, however, took me by surprise. Wanting something more exciting, I texted Kim and arranged to meet her. At her request, after the first time, we decided to meet right in her apartment. Kim opened the door and invited me inside, giving me a passionate kiss. I assumed that we would immediately get down to business and kept my arms around her, but she carefully freed herself and picked up her purse, which was lying on the table by the door. "I'm sorry, but I'm not the one meeting you today. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, and I hope you'll forgive me." "I don't understand. If not you, then who?" "She's waiting for you in my bed. I think you remember the way." And with these words, she walked out the door, leaving me with my mouth open in surprise. Damn, I really wanted to spend the night with Kim. I thought about leaving, but for some reason I trusted her that she wouldn't let me down, so I walked down the short hallway to her bedroom. The door was closed, so I knocked. "Come in." I opened the door, and on the bed, partially covered by a sheet, but showing breasts no less impressive than Kim's, lay a blonde woman who I estimated to be about my age. It only took me seconds to connect the dots. Her hair was shorter and less shiny, but her blue eyes and striking cheekbones were as clear as day. "You must be Kim's mom. Nice to meet you." "You figured it out pretty quickly. She said you were smart, but we both thought I'd have to reveal my identity." "She's an exact copy of you. Kim's future husband will be one lucky man for a long time." "Thanks for that sweet compliment. Now take those damn things off and come see me. They say we're on a strict schedule, and I'm going to make the most of it." During breaks between our mattress fights, Katie told me her story. Kim's father left some time ago, and she didn't expect to get married again. However, an elderly gentleman fell in love with her and wanted her to marry him. He knew she didn't love him, but he didn't care. He only needed her company and sometimes sex. All she asked for was privacy, so she arranged for a daughter visit and then brought me in to meet her needs. She apologized for the deception, but it was necessary to maintain the secret of her marriage. I assured her there was no problem and thanked her for her explanation. I was aware of the parallel with my own situation and sincerely hoped that her story was true, that her husband actually knew what she was doing. After 4 months of active online dating, I admit it has become a little tiring. It's really not my style, and I was really hoping there would be light at the end of this tunnel. But the fact remained that Bonnie showed no signs of slowing down, even as our weekends and evenings continued to be filled with love and affection for each other. I really loved her, and for the first time I began to wonder if I could somehow just accept what she was doing and stay married to her again. I wasn't ready yet, but the door opened slightly. After 2 weeks, everything changed, although I didn't realize it at the time. Last week was actually a dateless week, but I was feeling a little lonely, so I responded to a message I had recently received in my inbox, and we agreed to meet at the bar at 5:30 p.m. on Monday. I recognized her as soon as she entered because she was dressed exactly as she described to me. I looked at her until she met my gaze and smiled a melancholy smile, and then walked towards me. Henry. Yes, and you must be Anne. She had long light brown hair, straight and reaching almost to her butt. Her physique was cozy and attractive. She had not very large breasts and wide hips with a small belly. I liked her very much. She sat down, but was clearly uncomfortable, and as soon as I sat down, she stood up. I'm sorry, Henry. This isn't about you, but I just can't do it. Sorry for wasting your time. She hurried to the door, but I was faster. I wanted to at least calm her down before she tried to leave. Wait, Anne. Please wait a second. By then, there were already a few eyes staring at us, and they were probably wondering what kind of man dared to upset this lady. I stood between her and the door, and she just stopped, although I expected her to try to push past me. I'm sorry, Henry. I know you're disappointed, but don't worry about me. I'm worried about you. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, but I can't do it. I'm just not the type to have casual sex. Then let's just go back to the table and spend some time talking. I can do that too. I don't want to waste your time. You came here for a reason. That's true, but even if this was the most important thing tonight, I still won't be able to arrange anything else. So let's just make a new plan where I can spend a couple of hours meeting a very attractive woman, and it never will. It won't be a waste of time. Her face brightened, and she nodded. I took her hand and gently led her back to our table, and soon the rest of the diners returned to their conversations. She ordered a drink, and we sat in silence until it arrived, after which she took a sip and seemed to feel much better. I can only imagine what you think of me. I think you're a woman who finds herself in a situation she's not comfortable with and has second thoughts. That's it. I saw her eyes fall on the ring on my finger, and then she made direct eye contact with me. Are you married? From a legal point of view, yes. What does it mean? I'm legally married, yes, but it's a little unconventional at the moment. Does your wife know you're here? She doesn't know exactly where I am, but in a general sense, she knows what I'm doing. And that suits her. It was a choice she made instead of us getting divorced. She thought about it for a moment, and then, can I hear the story? And I talked again about the recent history of my marriage and my wife's decision and how it brought me here tonight. She was amazed. So, can she be with him right now? Or was earlier today? Mondays are almost always busy because she and I spend the weekend together and she can't have sex with me. What about your? Bonnie is right in that my libido is significantly lower than hers. I like it, of course, but I don't have the same need as she does. Anne and I spent the entire evening at the bar until it was time for me to go. We ordered food from the counter and slowly drank a couple of drinks each. I left a huge tip for occupying a table for 3 hours. As I walked her to the car, I asked if I could see her again this week. She turned around and looked at me. I won't sleep with you if that's what you're aiming for. Actually, I was thinking more about having dinner and maybe dancing, and I'd like to hear your story when you're ready. She hesitated for just a minute. I can meet you on Thursday. Let's meet at the Olive Garden at 5:30 p.m. I don't really like to dance, but there's a piano bar I'd like to go to. No promises about my story, though. I opened the car door for her, and she was about to get in, then she stopped. She stood up and kissed me on the cheek. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Henry, and for your understanding. And then she left. Strangely, on the way home, I felt really good. Better than most nights spent in the arms of one of the ladies. Wasn't that strange? I arrived at Olive Garden 5 minutes early and found Anne, who was already there and had found a table. I went over to kiss her on the cheek at the table, and she let me. We chatted a bit about what's been going on since we last saw each other, nothing much for either of us, and then ordered. She began her story without an introduction. I married Wayne when I was 22. We were married for 13 years, and then he left me 4 years ago. If you do the math in your head, I'm 39. He left me for his secretary. I know it's a cliché, but it's there. He left me with a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, so I decided to focus on raising them. Now Charlie is 16 and Grace is 13, and they have their own lives, so I decided to take care of some of my needs. I went on a couple of dates that didn't work out, but I found that being around a man sparked something in me again, if you know what I mean. Certainly. It's like something where you're away from it for a while until you don't need it anymore, but then you come across it again and the old feelings come back. Exactly. But I didn't want to ruin a potential relationship by jumping into bed with a guy and not making him respect me, so I decided I'd have a few anonymous hookups to take the edge off. But when I went and saw you and was confronted with it, I was able to cope with it. I realized that it wasn't me. I'm glad it wasn't something I did or what I looked like. Just the opposite. You are a handsome man, Henry, and I had a very good time on Monday. This smoothed over my embarrassment, otherwise I would not have agreed to see you again. Tell me about your children. Charlie is a pretty quiet person. His favorite things are books, science fiction, and fantasy. He plays chess and is on the debate team. He's a little nerdy, but he's a good young man and in the top 10 in his class. He has an Ivy Award. He's thinking about the league, but I don't know if I can afford it. I'm sure something will work out, and there's nothing wrong with being a nerd. After high school, the nerds usually run the show. Look at Bill Gates. There was something lyrical in her laugh that made me smile. Gracie is very outgoing. She has a million friends and is very into fashion, music, and all that teenage style. She's not old enough to date yet, but she goes out with friends a lot. Any contacts from your ex? Just child support and alimony deposited into my account every month and birthday cards for the kids. But he just signs Dad and sticks the check in. I wouldn't be surprised if his secretary did it for him. Nothing for Christmas and no personal letters or phone calls. They cash the checks because it's free money, but other than that they don't seem too concerned that he's gone. He was always working anyway, so they didn't see him grow up. Do you have children? Ginger is 20 years old and a sophomore at Caltech. She plans to become an engineer like her father. There was a short break while our food was delivered. Does she know what's going on between you and your wife? I called and told her after all this came out. She's trying not to take sides and hopes we can work this out, even though she criticized her mother for what she did. The conversation died down a bit as we ate, and what we ate was more bland. She worked in the administration of a local college and made decent money. She enjoyed helping children get started on their futures and had no immediate plans to look elsewhere. After lunch, we headed to the 88 Keys piano bar she mentioned. We found a table somewhere in the middle and ordered drinks. We listened for about 30 minutes before I suggested we try the small dance floor I noticed when we entered. The music was slow, so she agreed since her main aversion to dancing was fast. I kept my distance at first, not wanting to think that I was trying too hard to get close to her, and she obviously noticed. Is there some reason why you are so far away from me, Henry? I just didn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Pull me closer. I want to feel your body on mine." I did exactly that. We danced several times that evening until it was time for me to announce curfew. I silently cursed the rules I had set because I wanted to stay with her longer. But we paid the bill, and I drove her back to the restaurant to pick up her car. I helped her out of the truck and opened the car door for her. Before sitting down, she put her hands on my shoulders and kissed me on the lips. Only a few seconds passed. There was no tongue, but it felt good. I had a great time, Henry. Thank you. Can I see you again next week? I will be very disappointed if you don't call me. We exchanged another short kiss, then she got into her car and drove away. It was easy to chalk it up to the excitement of meeting someone new, but I couldn't stop thinking about Anne all weekend. Even Bonnie noticed how distracted I was a couple of times. I found myself in a difficult situation. It had been over 2 weeks since I had sex, and I felt it acutely. I still didn't want to have sex with Bonnie for the reasons previously stated, and I didn't really want to see any of my connections because it would be disrespectful to Anne. So I did what men have done for centuries in similar situations. This was far from an ideal solution. As I fell asleep that night, listening to Bonnie's heavy breathing next to me, I thought about Anne. The next 2 weeks passed without incident. I was still satisfying my own sexual needs while seeing Anne 3 or 4 nights a week. My feelings for her grew stronger every day. I even closed my online account. We ate dinner every time we met and tried almost every type of cuisine at least once. We went to the piano bar a couple more times, but many nights we just found a place to park. We held hands and talked about all sorts of nonsense and everything under the sun. We kissed a lot, but it was clear from the very beginning that Anne was not a woman for public speaking. To be clear, kissing and public displays of affection were okay and even encouraged, but she didn't feel comfortable doing anything more than that in public. I didn't try to have sex with her in the back seat or anything, but I did try to touch her breasts, and she kindly asked me not to do that in public. To be honest, her modesty was even exciting for me, and I hoped that it would not spill over into my personal life. We had been seeing each other regularly for just over a month when she invited me to dinner at her home. Her children, she said, were also able to make plans for that evening at her request, and she wanted to cook me a romantic dinner. I dressed appropriately and arrived on time with a bouquet of flowers. Anne opened the door, wearing an elegant white dress, her beautiful hair flowing freely down. Dinner was ready in a couple of minutes, and we sat and talked while we ate. About halfway through dinner, I felt her foot find my calf, and I became aware of some actions on her part that carried deep meaning, such as the way she lifted food from her fork, which could only be described as seductive. We cleared the table, and she said that she would wash the dishes after I left. She turned on the stereo, and the soft tones of Norah Jones filled the space. She wrapped her arms around my neck and rested her head on my chest as we swayed to the music. It didn't take long before we kissed passionately. I moved to her neck and began to caress and suck her earlobes, which made her exclaim, "Oh, Henry, that feels so good." Anne turned out to be very active in bed. She let me lead, but had no problem letting me know what she wanted, and I always tried to follow through. Things were starting to get complicated. Over the weekend, I took some distance from Bonnie. We discussed her needs from time to time, and they didn't seem to diminish at all. I suspected that she was seeing Brian or someone else 3 to 5 times a week. But unlike my 3 or 4 weekly dates with Anne, I assumed that their meetings were solely for the sake of sex. Anne and I made love about twice a week for the next few weeks. Our libidos were definitely more in sync than Bonnie and I were. Bonnie never turned me down, but a couple of times when I made hints to Anne, she gently said that she was not ready yet, but she would welcome affection and loving tenderness. Anne and I had been dating for almost 3 months when our first crisis occurred over her daughter, Grace. From what Anne said, Grace knew her mother was dating someone and was happy for her. But Anne kept quiet about the details of my marital status and unique situation. One evening, I went to Anne's for dinner and perhaps something more. Grace and Charlie both had plans for that evening and left. We had just sat down to eat when the front door opened and Grace walked in. Sorry. I forgot my math notes for study group with Jessica. I'll be there in a minute. She ran into her room and returned with a folder in her hands. I thought she would just leave, but she decided to introduce herself. You must be Henry. I'm Grace. What the hell? She noticed my ring. I was still married and technically still trying to make things work with Bonnie, so I didn't take it off. Grace noticed this immediately. Are you married? Well, yes, for now. Have you filed for divorce? Not yet, no. I'm afraid it's complicated. How hard can it be? You shouldn't date other women when you're married, I think. Anne finally interrupted. I think we know what you're thinking, Grace, but honestly, it's none of your business. Jessica is waiting. We'll talk later. Anne led her out the door and then turned to me after she closed the door. I'm so sorry, Henry. Nothing to apologize for, honey. She was trying to protect her mom. I would have been more concerned if she had seen the ring and said, "Yay, Mom." She was expressing a legitimate concern. I know, but it's not her place to confront you like that. She should have talked to me. By this time, we were hugging, her head laying sideways on my chest, and our arms wrapped tightly around each other. She got upset when she saw the ring and got emotional. Don't be mad at her. We had dinner, and the conversation eventually got better, but I felt that Grace's outburst gave Anne pause. We spent some time cuddling, but nothing else. The mood was ruined. The next day, Anne called me while I was at work. I would like to apologize again for the way Grace spoke to you. It was inappropriate, but I spoke to her last night about her concerns. I explained your situation to her as clearly as possible, and also how we met and what a gentleman he was. You were there that first night. She's not entirely happy with what's going on. She's worried that I'm becoming a victim of circumstances and not thinking clearly. I told her I understand her concern and I'll be more careful, but at the end of the day, it's my life and my relationship. Sounds like I'll have to win her over at some point. Perhaps, but you have won me over, and that is the most important thing in my opinion. Are we meeting tonight? Dinner and bowling as promised. See you tonight. We continued dating for another 2 months, which was 9 months since Bonnie and I had spoken. Bonnie still wasn't ready to give up on her young lovers, at least not when we last talked about it 3 weeks ago. I didn't press the matter because my relationship with Anne was getting tiresome and I was beginning to think about bringing things to a conclusion. But what was most alarming from my perspective was that Anne seemed to be moving away. I asked what was wrong, and she brushed it off with some excuses about work or children. I didn't believe it, but I didn't insist either. It was Friday night when Anne made the decision for both of us. She seemed distracted all evening, and I felt like she was finally going to tell me what was bothering her, but was having trouble starting the conversation. Time was running out for me to take her home, and she decided she couldn't wait any longer. Henry, I'm sorry, but I don't think we should continue seeing each other. It felt like a dagger was stabbed into my heart. Why, Anne? I thought we were fine. We're really fine, Henry, but I can't take it anymore. She paused, as if choosing her words. Henry, I'm in love with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I can't keep living like this. I can't keep sharing with you, even if it's with your wife. I tried to interrupt, but she raised her hand. Let me finish. It breaks my heart every time I have to send you home to her. For a while, the happiness of our next meetings was enough, but now it's not enough. One of my best friends at work got married last weekend, and I couldn't even bring my boyfriend. I'm turning 40 in 2 weeks, Henry, and I want to find someone to spend my life with. I found him, but he's unavailable, so I need to free myself from him to find someone. Who will be available? By this time, Anne was crying, and if I wasn't crying, I was very close to it. Sometimes you have to reach a crossroads, a moment of choice, before you can make a difficult decision, and here I was standing at that fork in the road. And to my surprise, the decision was not that difficult. As I turned over Anne's words in my head, I realized that I was more afraid of losing her than I was afraid of losing Bonnie. The only catch was the agreement I gave my wife. Anne, I love you too, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The fact is, I was almost doing the same thing as Bonnie, trying to have the best of both worlds, and that's not fair to you. If I were a different person, I would just break this bond with Bonnie, and that would be it. But I made a promise, no matter how crazy it was, and I have to follow through with it. I took her hands in mine. Can you give me the weekend to figure this out? Don't delete my number, and don't make plans with someone else. Anyway, I'll give you the answer on Monday. We'll meet at the bar where it all started, and I'll tell you, how are things going? Can you do this for me? Yes, honey, I can. I'll be there at 5:30 p.m. I know it's hard for you, but it's hard for me too. I need to know where I'm going, but I can wait a few more days. I took her home and mentally prepared myself for the weekend ahead. I was on edge Friday night and Saturday morning trying to decide how to approach this. If Bonnie noticed, she didn't say anything, although I felt you'd have to be blind not to see that I was in a nervous state. My first thought was to approach this directly and tell Bonnie that I had met someone else, and if she wanted us to stay together, she should give up her lover immediately. But then I realized that this would make her do things she didn't want to do, and while she might comply with it for a while, eventually she would probably end up dating someone in secret again. After all, she kept it a secret for 3 years and was only caught by accident, and probably assumed she could do it again. In the end, I decided that the only way to get an honest answer was to let her assume that our arrangement would continue as before. So I asked her the same question that I have asked occasionally over the past 9 months. Is she any closer to giving up her lover and being with me only? So far the answer has always been no, and if this continues I will file for divorce and start planning a life with Anne. If she feels like this might end, then I'll have to make a decision, and I'm not sure what that decision is. Bonnie and I made an agreement, sure, but was I willing to sacrifice my entire life for that agreement? Finally, on Saturday afternoon, I popped the question. I tried to make it as casual as possible so that it didn't seem like her answer was the turning point in our lives, and I think that was successful based on her answer. Honey, I wish I could say I'm ready, I really would. But it hasn't seemed to slow down our relationship at all, and since I haven't heard anything from you, I've had to see him more often. I know it's hard, dear, but it seems to be working for us. Just give me a little more time, okay? I nodded, seeming to agree. I quickly left the room and went to the garage, suddenly overcome with emotion. I went with the flow, enjoying my time with Anne, staying married to Bonnie, and avoiding a difficult decision. Now that I was finally faced with letting go of the woman I had dedicated more than 2 decades to, I found it difficult to cope with. The fact is that I felt comfortable seeing her every day. She knew how to comfort me if I was having a bad day and knew how to turn me on. She knew my likes and dislikes perhaps better than I did myself. She was my soulmate, and now I was faced with the prospect of cutting that half away from me. I know it's not exactly manly, but I went into the garage and had a good cry. I was mourning the impending death of my marriage to the woman I considered my soulmate. It was a terrible feeling, and I felt a piercing pain in the pit of my stomach. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. After I calmed myself, I called my lawyer and asked him to arrange for the papers to be served on Sunday evening. I didn't want to humiliate her by doing this at work, and I wanted it done before I met Anne. I had planned to actually serve them to her in advance, but for formal notice to be noted in court papers, it would have to be done by a court officer. I could always cancel this if Bonnie seemed inclined to just walk into the lawyer's office and sign the papers. Finally, on Saturday night, Bonnie noticed that I was on edge, and I just told her that I wasn't feeling right. She did her best to calm my bruised nerves, which helped, but it also made me really feel like she loved me, which only made me feel worse about what was about to happen. It was a vicious circle. I slept restlessly that night until Bonnie wrapped her body around mine, something she had done many times before to help me sleep, and tonight was no exception. I always loved the way our bodies fused together. The love she has given me over the past 12 hours has actually made me reconsider my position. I was still very much in love with Bonnie and began to actually ask myself what I had to lose by allowing her to have sex with other men to satisfy her needs when I wasn't around. I mean, besides the fact that I might show up to her work and find she wasn't there, would that really cost me anything? Could I just put it out of my mind and be happy for her? The answer, unfortunately, was negative. For me, marriage was a commitment and vows were to be taken seriously. Giving up all others definitely came under that, although I think it really came under the for better or for worse point. It was a difficult period in our lives, of course, but it was times like these that we should have united and overcome it, rather than looking for someone else to fill the void. My decision, although difficult, was accepted. I made us lunch and pulled out my copy of the divorce papers from my desk where I had hidden them. The documents provided for an equal division of assets. Our salaries and retirement accounts were comparable, so there was really nothing to argue about other than the divorce itself. We sat down to dinner, and I knew Bonnie had noticed my distant behavior, but she didn't say anything. I wondered if she knew what was coming, or even had an inkling of the possibility. I received my answer shortly after I pushed the documents towards her. She picked them up and read them, smiling bitterly. I thought we were fine, Henry. Why now? I can't go on like this anymore, Bonnie. I've tried, I really have, but I need someone who will meet my emotional and physical needs. It was your choice, darling. I was willing to be all of that for you. I know, but I also need this woman to get all her needs met with me, and that's just not where you are at right now. If I thought you were nearing the end, maybe I would try to hold on. I actually set the whole thing up hoping you'd see what you'd be missing without me, and it would make you give up on your lover. But all it did was get you into his bed more often and still give you me to come back to home. That's why you asked me this yesterday, isn't it? I nodded. What if I said I was ready to give myself to you? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me is glad I didn't have to make that decision. So she's waiting for your call. We're meeting tomorrow night so I can tell her what happened. This is wrong, Henry. You can't keep her in suspense for so long. Call her now and tell her that you belong to her now. You're very calm about it. You don't seem to care about losing me. Oh, honey, I'm absolutely devastated, but like I said, I've been preparing for this for months. I expected it to end like this from the moment you told me your plan. I was hoping it wouldn't happen, but I was pretty sure what will happen. I agreed to this because I wasn't ready to let you go, and it bought me time with you. I've always said you're the smartest woman I know. What is her name? Anne. Does she have children? 2. Her son is 16 years old, but I haven't met him yet, and her daughter is 13 years old, and she doesn't really like me. Why not? She didn't like her mother dating a married man. Oh, if this is all, then it will pass. Once you are with her mother all the time, you will win her affection. Go ahead, call her. And Henry, I'd like to meet her someday. In fact, if you can get her to come over for dinner tonight, that would be great. Are you? Are you serious? She stood up and walked over to me, took my hands in hers, and looked me straight in the eyes. Henry, all I want is your happiness because I love you so much. If you can't be happy with me, then this is what has to happen, but I would like to know the woman who will replace me. And I would really like us all to become as friends as possible. Someday we'll have Ginger's graduation and wedding, and who knows what family events we'll see each other at. I will always love you, Bonnie. I know, and I will always love you. Now call Anne. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, thinking about how strange this all was. When I spoke with Bonnie, I was expecting a completely different experience. It just goes to show that you never know. Anne answered the phone after a couple of rings, and I told her what happened and what Bonnie said. She was as in disbelief as I was, but in the end, she was very happy. So we can really be together, Henry. No more losing you at 8:30, no more spending weekends alone. Yes, darling. And if you don't feel comfortable coming to dinner, I understand. Honestly, I wouldn't be very comfortable coming to her house like that. Can we all go out? And I think Gracie would like to see things go well. Can she come too? I put aside my conversation with Anne and contacted Bonnie to make sure she was okay with going out and seeing Grace. I just wanted everyone to be comfortable. Bonnie agreed, and we discussed the details. As I ended the conversation with Anne's "I love you," I turned to find Bonnie on the couch, quietly crying. I went over to calm her down, and she cried into my shirt for a few minutes. "I'm so sorry, Henry. I couldn't have prepared myself for hearing you tell another woman that you love her. You can go to her if you want. I will understand." "No, Bonnie. I get to spend the rest of my life with her. Right now, I'm going to spend some time with the woman I've loved for the last 2+ decades." We spent time going through our wedding album and a photo album of Ginger when she was little. We laughed and cried, remembering the life we spent together. It was bittersweet, and I cursed the biology that kept us apart. I doubted my masculinity because I couldn't support my wife in her time of need, but Bonnie prevented such thoughts, assuring me that no man should have to put up with what she did, no matter the reason. Finally, it was time for dinner. We went to the bedroom to get dressed. Given the circumstances, I expected Bonnie to be a little more modest, but she stripped down as usual. I was surprised, but it was written all over my face. "There's not much new on my radar, darling. You've been looking at my naked body for over 20 years now. It's unlikely that this will suddenly start to bother me." As we approached the restaurant door, she pressed herself against me one last time. Right in front of the door, she stopped and turned us around so we were facing each other. "When this evening is over, I expect you to leave with her. Don't worry about me. I'll get in the car myself and drive home. You belong to her now, and it shouldn't be any different." My eyes moistened a little as she kissed my cheek, and we walked through the door. The evening took on a surreal quality. Anne and Bonnie quickly became friends and soon acted like old acquaintances. Anne looked very beautiful, and I marveled at the circumstances that brought us together. Grace was wearing a very nice green dress and was in a good mood. She asked Bonnie a few questions that seemed designed to make sure I told her the truth about our situation, and she seemed pleased with the answers. At one point, I went to the restroom and found Grace waiting for me at the exit, wanting to talk to me alone for a minute. "Henry, I'm sorry for the way I lashed out at you when we first met. I'm not sorry for expressing my disagreement. I'm just sorry for the way I did it. I expected no less from a daughter who loves her mother. It was an unusual situation. No problem." "I'm glad to hear that. Mom is happier than I've seen her in a long time. She devoted almost 5 years to just me and Charlie, and I'm glad that she finally cares about her happiness. She loves you very much and talks about you constantly. When she decided to end the relationship because she couldn't have you completely, she was absolutely unhappy. I'm glad everything turned out this way." "I'm glad too. Thank you for your understanding, Grace. I will try to make her happy every day." She gave me a quick hug and then went to the restroom while I walked back to the table. Bonnie and Anne continued to talk and laugh. It was so strange. When the night ended, I actually left Anne and Grace and Bonnie alone, which made me feel bad. I didn't like the thought of her coming back to an empty house. I still cared about her, still loved her, even though I knew the way things turned out was the only possible outcome. I opened the back door and helped Grace into the car. Then Anne handed me the car keys and walked around to sit in the passenger seat. I followed her and helped her in, and then took everyone back to her apartment. Even though I had to get up early for work the next morning, I wasn't going to miss the opportunity to finally spend a full night with Anne. The house was sold as part of a divorce because neither of us wanted to continue living in the house in which we shared so many memories. Too many memories. I moved into Anne's apartment. The following week after that dinner we all had together, although most of my belongings were put into storage until we could find a home for all of us, which was expected both after the divorce was finalized and after Anne and I were finally convinced of our common future. Let's be honest. 4 months of dating without living together was not the basis for a lifelong commitment. But our time together in her apartment only strengthened our belief that we were right for each other. And once the divorce was finalized, we found the perfect four-bedroom house in the same school area to keep Anne's children from changing schools. Although we weren't dating, Charlie had heard about me from his mother and sister, and we got along great. In any case, he was leaving for college soon. Anne and Bonnie remained friends and met for lunch from time to time. We all celebrated Thanksgiving together, and Ginger and Grace marveled at Anne's growing belly. Oh, really, I didn't mention that. Neither Anne nor I had planned to have more children before we met, but one night, as we cuddled in bed, Anne seemed thoughtful. I asked if everything was okay, and she went silent for a moment, and then everything came out of her. I know we haven't talked about it, honey, but I want to have a baby with you. I'm 40 and you're 45, but that doesn't mean we can't be great parents together. I know Ginger is all grown up now. Charlie will be leaving soon too, and Grace will only stay at home for a few years, which means we can travel and be together. But I really want us to have our own child. What do you think? It came out of her all at once, with no breaks where I could interrupt. I'm not even sure she sighed at any point. I just waited for her to finish, and she waited for me to say something, looking at me expectantly. I leaned down and kissed her lips, then her neck, and went down to her chest. She closed her eyes and enjoyed the pleasure, seemingly forgetting about the previous topic of conversation. But when I climbed back up to her ears and whispered, "You've taken your last pill," she wrapped her arms around me and kissed me so passionately that I swear I saw heaven. Anne didn't get pregnant that night, but we had fun practicing. Bonnie met and eventually married a doctor from a nearby hospital after accidentally running into him at a conference. She fully disclosed how our marriage ended, and after a few tense days of digesting the information, he decided he could live with it, and they moved on. I'm very happy for her. I never wanted anything more than a happy ending for her, and I'm glad she found it. I'm glad it worked out for all of us. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.